morning. Welcome to Dateline New Haven. WNHH Radio, your home for community radio. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. John Velleca always makes the Elm City tick. He's our former assistant police chief, current sergeant-at-arms at the state senate, so don't mess with him up there if you're mad about a bill. And he's the resident criminal justice and policing expert here at WNHH. He's here in the WNHH studio to talk about criminal justice developments in our community. Welcome back, John. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
And we want to thank Yellow Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So, John Velleca, did you have any thoughts the other day? I mean, in some ways it kind of felt like to me a scene out of an old-fashioned novel, a short story about the human condition. There was a guy you might have been familiar with back in your day early on the beat named Johnny Jermaine Johnson, a member of the Island Brothers gang in Quinnipiac Terrace. No, in Farnham Courts. Yeah, I guess Quinnipiac Terrace. But he was but he got arrested along with three friends, I guess three fellow members of the organization.
Right, yeah, I was a patrol officer on scene that night.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I want to hear more about that.
The tunnel shooting, right?
Yeah. So there was a murder in 1994, I guess it was.
Yeah.
At Farnham Courts Housing Project. And they fingered these four guys. How many people died?
I think only one person died. Two other people got shot.
So four guys went to jail. 3 for life, 1 for 75 years, which is basically life, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And then a few years later, they were in jail quite a while.
Yeah, they not too long after that. I mean, I remember testifying in the trial. I was still a police officer, so I didn't make detective till '98, so it had to be before then.
And then but then in 2012. Oh, no, 2013, they got released from jail because it turned out a very aggressive former prosecutor named Jim Clark, who he kind of always pushed the envelope. He put up a witness who said on the stand and lied that he hadn't taken a deal to have less jail time returned for testifying.
Right.
And he lied about that on the stand, and the state didn't tell the other side that, which you're supposed to do.
Yeah, right.
And there were other problems with the evidence, and this was the main part of the evidence. So I think the state Supreme Court just went up and they said, let these guys go.
Yeah.
So these guys got out of jail after a bunch of years. It was very exciting. That was in 2013. And then they won a whole pile of money.
Yeah, right.
The state gave them each of them, $4.2 million. Can you imagine getting $4 million?
No, I'd like to.
So then they got out. They have a new life. They started at a name of promotion company called 365. They had various names: 365 Entertainment, 365 South. And then this guy Johnson JJ, he goes by the names Johnny J. He's spending his time partly up here and partly down in North Carolina.
Right.
Well, a week and a half ago, the police arrested down in North Carolina Johnny J for a shooting. So he had the second chance, $4.2 million.
Yeah.
He's back in. I mean, he made bond, but he's back in the system. Any thoughts? What was your reaction?
No, I mean, like we always say, just a small percentage of the people that have the proclivity to do that kind of thing that usually wreak the terror.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly procedurally, I guess Jim Clark followed up the case, and they got out on a technicality. But in my opinion, it doesn't mean that they didn't commit that shooting.
Right. Now there's been a big debate about. There have been a few issues on our website. One of them is some people have gone over the evidence from the state transcript, and they said the evidence was weak. Right. Doesn't mean they didn't do it, but it was really based on these two eyewitnesses who were very problematic. The other one had been proved to have lied, said at one point he saw the body face down, sometimes face up, which someone could mess up, but they were questioning it. Do you think, seems like you think it was the right guys? Or?
Well, like I said, I was the patrol officer on the scene.
Yeah, what was it like that night?
Oh, it was chaotic. It was hectic. It was very.
And that's back when there was a lot of gang warfare going on.
Right. That's when the island and the ghetto, which is what they called the Franklin Street projects, they would go back and forth.
So this was on the turf of the Franklin Street project.
This was on Franklin Street project. They came in through the tunnel.
Oh, which is the tunnel?
Remember, there used to be the tunnel that led into the courtyard of Franklin.
No.
Yeah, there was like I don't know if it's actually a tunnel. It's like it was kind of like an overhang kind of thing.
But it was above ground.
Above ground,
right by the highway.
But it was
there?
covered, yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. It was coming in from the
Grand Ave.
I think, from
Wallace.
West Wallace Street. Yeah, I believe so. And the tunnel leads right in, and that's what they did. They came in the tunnel and they opened fire and they hit a few people. And like I said, my job was to guard one of the shooting victims, and I can remember being in the ambulance with the shooting victim, and the shooting victim telling me exactly who was responsible.
Did he say it was these guys?
Yeah, by name. Yes, he did. by name.
Was this guy died or not?
No, he didn't die.
Was he one of the people who testified?
He did, and then there was problems with his testimony because he recanted, and then, there were a lot of issues.
So there you are in the ambulance.
Yeah.
And you watch this guy. Do you think he might die?
No, he had a bulletproof vest on, and he got shot in the arm. Yeah.
So he's telling you the names of these guys, including Johnny J.
Yeah, he didn't. He started to tell me. I was like, I'd been on 2 years at the time, so I was like the rookie guy, and they pretty much know when you're the rookie. So he started to talk to me, and I can't remember I might have been Ray Hassett, as a matter of fact, who was the detective I handed off this information.
He wasn't a
to.
detective, was he, Ray?
Yeah, Ray was a detective.
And he wasn't yet the head of the Dwight community.
No,
station.
he was a detective in homicide. I'm almost positive at this time.
Really? I never knew Ray worked homicide.
Yeah, he worked an undercover job for a couple of years too.
So he was there in the ambulance with you?
No, he was at the hospital. When I got to the hospital, because this kid stopped talking to me once he realized that I was a rookie. So
he thought you wouldn't be good enough to tell.
Yeah, no, he wanted to talk to a detective, so I went and got a detective.
But he told you the names.
He did. He ran the names back.
And what did he say it was about?
It was something that they had done something on in Q Terrace. They had shot somebody in Q Terrace.
So the Ghetto Boys had gone to Q Terrace,
right? And there was some kind of a drug issue going on there.
It was a drug issue.
Yeah,
drug
yeah.
terror.
Yeah.
And these were young people. Like, weren't the people arrested in their late teens or their early 20s? Because he's only 40 now, and this is 25 years later.
Darkest Henry's 50, isn't he?
Yeah, but Johnny J's 40, I think.
Right.
So he
yes, they were young. Yeah, they were the young kids. I mean, I was a young kid. I was only 22 at the time.
Oh yeah, what did you think when you were experiencing that as a young kid?
Oh my God, it's crazy. But that time, I had already got 2 years into New Haven in the early '90s. So anything at that point I saw was, was par for the course.
So here's this guy shot in the arm, and he's telling you.
I think he got hit in the vest too, but he didn't get a.
I had a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, a bulletproof vest.
And do you have one on too?
I did, yeah. I was in uniform.
You guys here, two guys with bulletproof vests, young guys.
He had, I think later on it came to be known that he had one of the bulletproof vests. I don't know if you remember, but there was a civilian in the New Haven Police Department that was selling our old vest out the back door.
Oh, no!
Yeah, I'm almost positive he had one of ours on.
That guy. So you both had police issued. Yeah. Here you guys,
actually at that time they weren't police issued. We weren't issued them. You had to buy them on your own.
What were you thinking when you're sitting with this guy? Were you thinking that could be me in a different life, or
no, I was not.
I mean, you're around it. You're not that different in age. You're both wearing bulletproof vests.
Sounds like certainly, yeah. If I were to have grown up in in a housing project, and sure, of course, yeah. I mean, how do you, and
what did that make you think about being a cop and dealing with a guy like that?
I don't know. I had, my first few years were filled with a lot of different thoughts. Most of them were, why am I here? Why am I doing this?
So he's telling you this, and he tells you that he had gone there and done the other shooting, or no?
No, he did not tell us that. That was found out. I found that out later for trial preparation. And so before trial prep, you read the whole case.
So you went to the hospital and you told Ray Hassett, the detective.
Yeah, I'm almost sure it was Ray Hassett. I don't
and you said, now this guy named him. So you, when you went to trial, were you sure they had the right guys? Because just like, now, when he said those were the guys, is because he saw them do it, or he knew they were after? He saw them.
Yeah, no, he saw them. The kid I talked to said
weren't they masked? Weren't they masked up?
Right, but he knew who it was. Somebody had said, one of the guys had said something, and he knew immediately who it was.
Okay, but that's not proof.
Well, it's not like, a facial, but it's, if you put a mask on, we were sitting here talking, I would still know it was you. You know what I mean?
What if, well, it's unclear. Maybe me.
I don't know if they had full, I think they had like bandanas just covering their lips kind of deal. I mean,
so then you testified, what was the trial like? Because the state obviously didn't have strong evidence.
Four of them were on trial at once, right? If you remember. So you had, I can't remember, DeMarco was one of the attorneys, Williams was one of the attorneys.
Oh, John Williams.
Yeah, Paul Cardy was one of the attorneys. I can't remember the fourth one. And then Jim was the prosecutor. So all four of them were in the room, and the place is packed, with all their friends. So yeah, that was like one of my first tries to testify. It was quite an experience. But they didn't ask me very much. They asked me about what he had said initially, and then the defense came on and talked about the vest and who this kid is and who do you know him to be and that kind of stuff. So,
and what happened when they got out in 2013? What were you thinking? Now you'd been a seasoned cop,
right?
Were you already? You weren't.
I was retired.
Yeah, but you were retired in 2013. Okay, what did you think when you read that?
I think that's the way that's justice. That's our system. It's not a matter of. I mean, it is a matter of whether you do it or whether you don't, but it's also a matter of whether we play by the rules and we follow the directions. Because if that breaks down, then
Well, what some people say is maybe
there's-
they'd been in long enough so that their brains had developed differently from when they were adolescents. There's a lot of talk about
yeah,
that now.
I know that. I know that report, and I've read that report, and it
But
makes
then
a
he
lot of
came
sense.
out and
But
he's now allegedly done another shooting.
and they just got that other kid who killed Tyler White.
We're going to get to
now.
that. We're going to get to that.
I get it, but you're 18, 19 years old, and you're a gang member, and you're doing what you're doing. You know what you're doing. Come on, I understand that your brain is not fully developed, but your brain is developed enough to know that you shouldn't be shooting and killing
We'll get back to that
people.
Latin King thing. So when they got out, but now what'd you think last week when you see, okay, this guy got $4.2 million.
Right.
He spent a lot of time in jail. He got a second chance at a free life. What was your thought when you see that he committed a shooting again?
Oh, my thought is the same as it's been for the latter half of my career. As soon as you get into the command level positions there, you know that we're not rehabilitating people in the correctional system. We're simply not. We may be giving them a second chance, all right? But we're not sending them out the skills and the education to know enough to make that, to really use that second chance.
So was your thought, I don't want to put words in your mouth, John.
No.
Was your thought that if Johnny J had gotten good training and a skill, he could have come out and not become
I believe so,
back
yeah.
into life?
I think that the skill is important, but I also think the education, the ethical education behind that.
Ethical education. Tell me about that.
Ethics and morality come with education, I believe. If you start to, you just educate yourself with regard to whatever, higher education curriculum there is, ethics and morals are going to cross into that somewhere, right? I mean, if not, they're going to be guided by the entire curriculum. And I think you learn a lot more about life as the more you get educated. And I think that if he had that education, he would realize it wouldn't be. He knows shooting people is wrong, right? It would be a matter of whether he would want that for himself, and he would be able to see other avenues. He would be educated enough to see other avenues.
Are you like a bleeding heart liberal who blames the system for not?
I think we could be doing a lot more.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes, I do.
That's
I
so
think that we've gone. And corrections has gone from, correction and rehabilitation to now simply security guarding prisoners while they're housed.
Yeah, I mean, no question about that. So some people would look at this and say, you see, people need to be put away for life. Other people say they need second chances. Other people would say you can't escape racism.
Right.
These guys are African American.
I don't think race has anything to do with that.
They're in a milieu where they don't have a lot of opportunities.
I don't really think racism plays in. I think racism plays into a lot of other things, to be honest with you. But I don't think it plays into this specific incident.
And then there was an interesting debate on our site about whether we were right to call it a second chance and a ticket to a new life when they got the money and they got out of jail. One guy wrote, BS. The guy was locked up for years for no good reason. We shouldn't need tickets to new lives. Then someone else said, you'd hope that life would get easy after reaching 40 with a full bank account, but inner peace isn't guaranteed by wealth or experience. That's interesting to me. That's what was compelling to me.
Listen, none of those people.
Because I think of the lottery. Lottery doesn't always change people's lives for the better.
No, actually, there's that show that's on that shows how it changes it for the worse. But right, I mean, so like
we always think, gee, I always lie around. What if someone just dropped $1 million? What would I do?
Right, I would have to go get help and figure out what to do with it. What to do, what not to do. You know what I mean?
And I know someone who was giving advice to some of these guys who was not happy about how they were spending the money. Mm. Not that you shouldn't have gotten a nice vacation or gotten a decent house and everything, but the feeling was that it wasn't being spent in a way that was gonna.
I think that's the thing is what do you learn? So you get back to what do you learn through education? Sometimes you learn through education to know what you don't know, to be able to look for assistance when you're in a situation that you're not accustomed to. Like a kid coming from the city, now he's got $4.5 million. That's a situation he's not accustomed to. Know enough to ask for help.
And after being
somebody.
in jail, which is where you really learn in jail is how to commit more crime and how bad the system.
The way it is now, and I don't want to totally just talk badly about the correctional system, but the reality is they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with prisoners, and as police officers, sometimes we don't help that by putting everybody in who we can in prison. We're overwhelming a system that's taxed already. So when you talk about a correctional officer, what can they do at this point except be a security guard?
And then here's the two takes in that same spin on that again. Living in New Haven wrote, this is sad. However, money cannot buy common sense, nor can it buy back years behind bars. Send a man to prison and treat him less than human while there, then give him millions of dollars. Tragic combination. But then Lookout says, oh, what happens when we put a criminal back on the streets due to a technicality? Our system is seriously broken. those are really different ways of looking at it.
Right. I don't think the system is broken when somebody gets out of jail on technicality. I think the system is actually working, to be honest with you.
And we're working it out, all the criminal justice issues, with WNHHFM's criminal justice expert, John Velleca. He's here today. We love when he comes in, and you're listening to us at 103.5 FM live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. So let's flip that around. So you were mentioning it before. Another 1994 murder was of Tyler White, the son of a New Haven police detective and the brother of he's retired, a current detective.
Right.
And older brother. He was hanging out with a Latin king. And the guy he was hanging out with was believed to be a snitch. And they both got murdered. And it was a double murder. A guy named Louis Noel Cruz shot his friend and held down this guy while somebody else shot him, Tyler White, because he was a witness. And he got life. But something has changed since that happened in the criminal justice system. The U.S. Supreme Court, no hotbed of liberals, said that when someone is young and they commit a gruesome crime, you shouldn't give them life anymore. That's cruel and unusual punishment. Because the brain develops when you're 18, 19, up to 25. And people said this in studies about how men drive, because I believe males should not be allowed to drive until they're 25. That's crazy. I mean, they say they just don't make the good judgments. And that you can, over time, mature in a way that you're not the same person in terms of what judges make. You're not necessarily a threat to society years later. And it was required. This was a Supreme Court case that started with someone who was 14 when he was arrested. He said his criminal should make it life.
I think that's the. Go ahead.
So then they made it all the way up to 24 years old. So this guy, this who killed them, Luis Noel Cruz, was 18 years and 4 months when he committed it. And he denied committing the murders. And 2 years later, he denied committing the murders.
Right.
And he definitely did the murders. No one doubts it now. So the U.S. attorney and the family, sometimes family do want justice, want restorative justice and people not to be jailed for, but other times they feel it hurts them more if you ever let this guy out. They went to U.S. District Court Judge Janet Holt last week and said, please don't let this guy out. He knew what he was doing. He lied about it for years. We feel that we're safer if he's in for life. The social worker in the jail said he's definitely different. He's definitely not the man he was when he was 18 years old. It's now 25 years later, and he's a model prisoner. He works with other prisoners. I think he's safe to let out. And Judge Hall said, given what is now the law of the land, I do have to reduce his sentence. She made it 35 years, so that means that he'll be out in about 9 years. He'll be in his 50s. What do you think of that?
No, I don't agree with that. Listen, I understand when everybody's talking about this study. I can't remember. I have read it more than once. But if you really get down into that study, it'll show you that the bulk of that maturity of the brain happens in the early teenage years up to 15, 16, and then it trickles off to about 25. So when you're talking about brain development when it's 23, 24, 25, it's minuscule, right, compared to what it is in the front half of the adolescent years. At 18 years old, he knows what he's doing. He can't say, my brain's not developed. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I shot a guy in the head, and oops, I apologize. It doesn't work that way. You're a gang member. You know what you're doing. You shot a guy in the head. You would have shot the other guy in the head, except your gun malfunctioned. The case we're talking about, right, that was a 14-year-old, right? And also, I believe that 14-year-old...
Not the New Haven case, but the one the Supreme Court was. And then judges have now interpreted that to go up to 24.
Right, and they also said, too, that there's a factor in there when those kids were 14 and get convicted for life, they transition into an adult facility, or they're put in an adult facility at 14 years old. That also has a lot to do with how they've developed and and
but
how they think.
I got to tell you that I do not trust my judgment or even ethical compass at 18 years old, 19, 20, 21.
But I would bet that you didn't shoot somebody in the head, or didn't think that it was okay to shoot somebody in the head.
But I probably thought some of the things were okay that didn't have as big consequence because I grew up in a situation where I didn't.
True, and
I didn't have the same disadvantages.
If he were a gang member at 18 years old and sold a lot of drugs and maybe robbed a few people, okay, I could get it. You do dumb stuff like that. It's part of the gang culture.
So you believe in life sentences?
I believe some crimes are so egregious. Shooting a man in the back of the head and then trying to shoot another one in the head.
Question. But that means life, because other people say,
I think yes.
What
in
does
that
society
regard,
gain
yes.
by putting them together for life?
Society gains the safety that he may not do it again.
And you think when they're 50, 60, there's danger they'll go do it again?
Absolutely. Listen, I've worked shootings for a number of years.
But you don't think people can
Hundreds
turn
at this
around?
point.
You don't think people can turn around?
I think people can be turned around, but I also know this, Paul. Doing a drive-by shooting or even a walk-by and shooting up at the porch and doing whatever kind of shooting you want to do is a hell of a lot different than resting a firearm in the back of somebody's head and consciously putting 2 shots into their head.
Well, how about Warren Kimbrough, who was
problem.
already in his 30s when the Black Panthers, he and other Black Panthers in 1969 took a wrongly suspected informer to a creek in Middlefield at night, and they handed Warren the gun and said, "There's orders from National ISIM." They put it to his head, and he shot.
Right.
Do you think he should have served life?
Yes.
They gave him out in about 8 years. He was a model prisoner, and he became...
That's great that you're a model prisoner.
No, but
I'm proud of you.
But afterwards, he became the head of an organization that set the national model for how to turn people's lives around. They got millions of state dollars from the people who used to jail them, and they've credited that agency with having prevented a lot of people from going back to lives of crime.
Well, you know, I say the societal roll of the dice on letting murderers out of prison, we came up good on that one. But we don't know where we're going to come up. That's my point.
Gotcha.
There are people that should be let, and I believe, I believe in second chances and making mistakes and all this stuff. But I also believe that there are just some things that are just too egregious.
Now, so you're saying that jail is punishment,
or it's become punishment, right? Yeah.
So there, Michelle Alexander, who's a writer on criminal justice, she had an article recently saying 54% of our inmates in our national system have been convicted of violent crimes. So if we're talking about having fewer people in jail, we need to think about whether we can let violent criminals out of jail more. And she was talking about restorative justice programs.
Yeah, I read her.
You read that. So the families say they get together with the people who committed the crime.
Right.
And they talk it out, and they have to face the family and talk about what they could do to make amends. And then it gets monitored by a court over time. And if they truly make amends, they find ways. They do this in schools now, sort of justice. And she's saying even with killers, it can make them different people, and that the families are more nervous about violent criminals coming out of jail and they become hardened than they are if they can go through this kind of program.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Listen, the institutionalization we talk about, I believe that exists 100%. I really do. I think that the overcrowding in our prison system and the lack of rehabilitative efforts in some regards force these people to go into these prisons to become something that they're not in order to survive. That's for sure. There's no doubt about it. When we talk about that, and I think there's part of that article that also talks about violent crimes, but also there are varying degrees of violent crime, right?
That's what you were saying earlier. You think some crimes are so egregious.
Right, but there's also, too, if you go by what we classify as a violent crime statistically, you could talk about something that's threatening or harassment or things like that. Now, that's not on the same level as an assault or a shooting or a murder. So, I think that we need to extrapolate the violent crimes and put certain violent crimes in certain categories. When you start talking about letting people who have committed egregious murders out of prison, we certainly wouldn't want a Jeffrey Dahmer out of prison.
Cody Franklin,
and Jermaine Harrison. We could go down the route, right? These guys that have committed such violent acts, and it's not just the act of violence. Sometimes the act is depraved to a degree where we don't want them on. We were just talking about. I was talking to Tony Race, and we were talking about the job on, I think it was Vine Street back in 2011, where the wife had a protective order against the guy, and he left, and he came back, and he lied in wait for her, and he raped her, and then carved 27 crosses into her. Do you remember that?
That's horrible.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Did she die?
Yeah, she was dead when we got there. She was bound, and so that's So you look at that person, right? That was his first offense, right? Actually, he had a warrant for sexually assaulting her, but minus the domestic violence crimes, his whole life, he never had a crime in his life, right? Is that somebody that you'd want to put away for 10 years and say, okay, he's rehabilitated, we're going to let him out? If you're capable of something like that, I would hate to believe that you're just going to come out and we're going to take you for your word that you're not going to do it again. I mean, that's a little bit deeper than just the...
Well, I don't think the restorative justice program talks about taking people at their word.
No. I was talking about before when we're talking about, he's a model citizen, and the counselor says, listen, it's definitely not the same guy. He's this, he's that. I don't know if we can. Some people, I don't know if we could do that.
Well, I don't remember that advice. That's horrible.
Can't remember her name. She was very close with one of the doctors at Yale. I can't remember her name.
Well, we're talking about that on Dateline New Haven with John Velleca, our criminal justice expert, policing all matters law enforcement.
Hispanic. I can't remember her name. Hispanic woman.
All right. I wanted to ask you about, you talked about Tony Reyes. He's the assistant police chief, soon to become the acting police chief, end of this month. And
hopefully the permanent police chief.
Anthony Campbell is retiring. Any thoughts on his retirement? When he announced it, it was pretty controversial because he said, "I'm leaving. All my assistant chiefs are trying to leave. 50 cops have left in the last year or two because changes that are coming down with our contract. That's an arbitration. You can't pay us what the suburbs pay. You're taking away health care. We can't afford to stay." And one of the alders said, "Well, then, leave. We'll get somebody else." So what do you think about Campbell's resignation?
I understand where Anthony is coming from. He's a sole provider for his family. He's got, the benefits are a very big concern for everybody who has them and doesn't want to lose them. And like I said, we've talked. I love Anthony Campbell, great guy, very, very good guy. But I don't agree with him saying what he said on the way out the door. I think that some things need to just stay behind closed doors.
He said he did that to help the cops who are still there.
I don't see how it helps
takes
the
it
cops
seriously.
I think the city is. I think the city understands. I think the city is taking it seriously. It's a matter of what can actually be done.
Well, this is where I was going to go with this, John. I didn't think there were any bad guys in this. I don't think the alder who brought up the point.
Right.
I think they're trying to find a solution that's fair, that isn't just about 5 cops in high positions. I think Anthony had good reason to raise it. I think there's a dilemma that you and I have talked about so much. I don't know how they're going to solve it, John. Now they're saying, so we can't afford to pay what the suburbs pay.
Right.
So the suburbs steal the cops. And we can't afford even to keep the current level of benefits, the city believes, unless we get rid of a lot of cops. We've now taken the sworn number for us. We had to fill it from like 490 to 435, I believe.
Right.
You believe it can go under 400, right?
I believe 400 is a good number.
Would that free up enough money? They're still going to pay them as much as the suburbs, but would that make enough of a difference?
No, I think that and a combination of a redeployment scheme and putting some people where they need to be instead of where they are now. And that's an uncomfortable move. That's why I say a guy like Tony Reyes would be the guy to do that, because he's comfortable with making uncomfortable decisions. But I think that the city, listen, anytime you put an alder or the mayor in where you say, listen, if you do this, I'm going to leave. Of course, the rebuttal to that is going to be, okay, go.
Well, but the real point was, the people who were actually running that meeting for the alders, was that we do take it seriously. We can't just make a decision that affects just you.
That's where I disagree.
Because they were talking about, like, you don't want your benefits to be the same as what unions people have. So he said, if we change that, there's a whole group of executive management personnel who now get benefits tied to union benefits that we'd have to revisit. We have to look at what that costs, and we will. Yeah. They said, but we got to look at that.
Well, the thing here's what, and people, I heard Cotto came out, and some other people say, listen, they're trying to
union president.
Trying to come out with, they want something more than the officers. Well, it's a very big deal. It's a big deal when you lose officers, but you certainly cannot lose your executive command behind all this. And you certainly can't lose them both at the same time.
Now, for most of us, John, what the city's offering would be like winning the lottery, which I guess we've learned doesn't make your life better. Most of us don't get retirement. Most of us don't get that health care.
What you have to understand is for like myself.
Cops are risking their life. I don't begrudge them. I want everyone to make that.
Here, listen.
They work hard. They earn it.
When I came to New Haven, I was going to come to New Haven. Well, let's be honest. But here's what they said. Here's the deal, John. Here's what you get. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. You sign on to do this job. Okay, we make a deal. Now, as I'm 20 years in, you can't tell me you're pulling that back. Now, and outside of this, my last 10 years or so, we didn't have a raise because we had pension and health benefit increases. Yeah. So now I went to half of my career. I mean, I have my benefits. Don't get me wrong.
And you got a good payout for retirement.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining at all.
And also, I'm just trying to make it was tricky there, given what you said. That I agree with you. You did make a commitment to people, so some of the changes affected newer officers.
Right.
And one thing that's good is you don't retire based on your last 3 years when you run up the overtime. It's based on your base salary now. Correct?
See, that was those things kind of occurred, and we were like, really, we were surprised because for a lot of years it wasn't that way.
But now it's also the newer people, you have to be 25 years before you retire rather than 20.
Right. It takes the police department too long to get them to top grade. If they cut that to 2 years instead of 5, you would see people stay. And I will say it again, and I'm not popular when I say this because I always get phone calls after this by the guys in these positions who I'm friendly with. But there are some dead weight positions in the investigative bureau that need to get back to patrol. Right now, crime is low. All right, if we were dealing with what we were dealing with in 2011, I get it. I had 116 people in the bureau under me. There's only 63 or 61 or 63 actual detective spots.
Okay, is that good or bad?
Well, I mean, I would have liked to have more, right? But now it's good because you want to start pulling the dead weight. You don't need them. Not dead weight, I shouldn't say that. the positions that you don't necessarily need to fill right now because crime is low and things are good, that need to go back to the patrol division and start helping the guys chase these calls, right? Or if you want to keep it the way it is, then you have to change your deployment plan. You have to listen. We talk about walking beats. I understand the walking beats are not getting filled right now. Every time I say that somebody working in the want to jump on me in the comment section and say, "Hey, listen, you don't know what you're talking about because the walking beats are getting filled." Understood, but they are also using the money that they can be using to up your salary to hire more people so that they could fill the walking beats. If you were to get away from the whole, that whole plan that's in place right now, you may have some money to set in other directions. And listen, it's not an easy fix, but it's got to start somewhere.
So I got an idea. Tell me you think this would make a difference. It's been 10 years since Yale has announced any new big initiatives with New Haven. This wouldn't be huge either. What if Yale said to New Haven police officers, if you buy a house in New Haven, let's say particular neighborhoods, and you stay at least 5 years, we're going to put you in the Yale home buyer program that we give our employees, which we pay tens of thousands of dollars toward your down payment. What do you think?
I think that would be good. I think that anything that you could do right now to attract these cops here and keep them here is a good idea.
Right.
I believe that you're losing some very good police officers, and there's only a few, Christian Bruckharts who are good cops that want to be in New Haven and are not going to leave for nothing. The rest of the cops will find a home somewhere else, and that's just the reality.
He is a good cop.
Awesome, very good cop.
Really
I'm glad to
guy.
see him made that. Yeah, sharp, very sharp.
And sharp guy in the business is John Velleca, who's now you're listening to on Dateline New Haven at 103.5 FM, live stream at newhavenindependent.org. He's our criminal justice expert running down latest police news. And we are now joined by Harry Droz, the bravest man in New Haven, the WNHH station manager. But John, Harry, did you have any thoughts about Johnny J? Got the $4.2 million after he got let out of jail and he thought he'd be there the rest of his days on a murder charge, but the state screwed up. What was your thought when that happened? Or let me get you.
3. Yeah. Well, for me, somebody taking away your freedom is worth. I don't even know if they could actually give me the amount of money.
Well, I mean, what did you think about that? He got arrested again for a shooting.
Yeah, well, that's a totally different thing.
Can I just jump in for a second? We didn't take his freedom from him. He surrendered that when he did a shooting. True.
I think Harry's talking about the original one.
What's that?
I'm talking about the original one.
About the original.
Which one?
The murder. Not the most recent shooting.
Right, the murder in a Farnham Court. Yeah, they did that. Listen, they're on a technicality, but they did it.
But in any case, how'd you feel about a guy getting out of jail, getting $4 million, and getting arrested again?
You can't make that one up. You gotta be stupid.
Let me preface that when I just say they did it. That's my opinion. Okay,
right.
Hey, one thing the cops did well,
opinion.
And I really enjoyed pointing out that Renee Dominguez, who's the head of special victims, oversees that. She and her team did a great job recently in making a case and catching a guy for a whole string. They could end up having 10, 15 cases. Maybe they already have, I think, 7. A guy who was beating up and raping prostitutes.
Right.
At gunpoint. She did a great job on that one, along with her team, Mary Helen, Josh Kyle, Leonard Soto, Daniel Tilley. They did let that guy go at one point when they could have had him earlier.
Right. Yeah.
They 2 cops at first stopped the car, suspicious, outside Edgewood Park where they know there's a lot of activity.
Yeah.
And a prostitute gets out of the car and says to them, he had a gun to my head.
That was terrible.
And he was assaulting me. And then they found the gun under the seat. And then they turned off their body cameras. When they turned it on, they found a knife on the ground and they threw it into the water and they let the guy go.
Yeah.
And the police were already starting to look for this guy. He had a warrant out. They didn't check for warrants. Any thoughts?
No, they're terrible morons. That makes no sense. Really. If you're going to start doing that, just leave your badge on the shift commander's desk and go do something else.
Did you notice that one of those officers just filed suit against the city for not compensating them enough for a medical problem?
Yeah, I did see that, yes.
Yeah. Well, you know what gets me, though? I really believe at the top ranks of the police department, there's a consciousness of treating people with respect, including people who are engaged in criminal activity, especially prostitutes, right? And there took some work. Because remember, you were on the other side. We were fighting about this one, now to arrest prostitutes, arrest the Johns, work with the prostitutes. And there clearly was enough trust and respect for prostitutes in general that they provided key information to the police to make this case.
Yeah.
For instance, getting the rape kits in the hospital so there's DNA evidence. Most importantly, one woman got a new phone, but she had a cloud. She cloud photos, and the guy who took her phone, the alleged rapist, was taking a photo of himself on the phone.
I think their status is going to go up, right? Because you have Kamala Harris, who says she's for legalization of sex workers.
She is?
Yeah, she said that recently.
She was a tough prosecutor, Harry. There's a lot of criminal justice firm people were not going to be for her.
You know what she's doing right now. She smokes pot. She's for hookers. So she.
But really, you get to the point though, and all from a guy.
And we know our president is, he's for sex workers, right?
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
But what about this case? What were you thinking? Because I feel
this case is terrible. That was terrible police work.
You now have people run a department who, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
okay, from observing them, really are committed,
right,
to getting the message that we treat people with respect. And this was the ultimate. So the reason they were so, the high officers, they were pretty upset about what these officers did.
Sure.
Because of what fundamentally the message that gets out on the street and all the hard work they do to gain the trust. They work with an activist group. So, but does it happen in a vacuum? If you have people who run a department who are genuinely, like I know Renee Dominguez sure is. I know that the chief, and this is chief sure. I know Herb Johnson sure is.
Mm-hmm.
They try to get that message day and night. Trust us. We care about you. We'll work with you.
Yeah.
Why then does the beat cop fail so spectacularly?
I'll tell you precisely
and a couple
why.
Of them.
Well, first, this isn't a case of the officers looked at somebody who's a sex worker and said, we're not going to take this serious.
They did. They mentioned her by the number of the crime of sex work.
Understood. But I believe that these officers are probably this terrible in every other job that they do too. All right, they're not good. Period. End of story. And this is what happens when the alder who says, if you're going to leave and we have the guy at the top of the place that's got 10 years, so be it. Well, no, not so be it, because this is what happens when inexperienced cops are trained by inexperienced cops and are supervised by inexperienced cops.
Was there a failure of training and supervision?
Absolutely, 100%. Listen, you cannot train these officers the way they should be trained when 5 years is like a senior guy in New Haven. And then the guy who's supervising them got 1 year on the guy who he's supervising. I mean, it doesn't work that way. Listen, if I ever did this when I was somebody, I might have really faced a physical assault by my supervisor at that point, to be honest with you, because you just didn't do that. Listen, for you to call somebody in and I mean, for you to check a warrant and then you just give up because your computer's not working and you don't take the time to make a phone call to records.
But they also didn't believe.
Ridiculous.
They didn't believe the woman. They actually found the gun under the sea. It was turned out to be BB gun, but she told us they knew her story was
They're
true.
Just lazy.
Well, they
lazy,
talked about
lazy.
I forget the number for a sex worker. She's just whatever number it is.
1601.
They called her a 1601, and that was on the.
But I think what John is saying is correct. That these guys would be bad at whatever they do.
Yeah, they're just
so
not.
If they were surgeons, they'd leave the sponge in you. You know what?
Exactly.
That's the problem. That when you have lazy people, lazy thinkers, lazy everything, you get into trouble all the time. And these people will leave the sponge in you.
What I'm saying is that this happened to be, certainly, a prostitute and a John and a guy. A lot of things came together here to make this look like a real bad job. But I'm sure the next job they went on, they were just as bad on that one too. You just don't see it.
All right.
You know what I mean? That's my personal opinion.
And then 2 of the 3 cops are still in the force.
I know. I saw that. I know. Well, I got. Here's what I'll tell you.
Well, that's John's opinion.
That is my opinion. Caveat and the disclaimer. It's about. I think if Tony Ray says he's at least getting in his interim chief, I would assume that a lot of that stuff is about to change very quickly.
Think so?
Oh, yeah.
You think there'll be more?
Yes.
Because I've had experience with him where he did not take action when people.
He is the assistant chief. Let's not forget.
He was the person in charge and did not take action.
The only action comes from the chief, and a lot of the underlings of the chief don't do much because they know they can't. They don't want to usurp the chief.
So you think Tony Race is going to surprise us and be tough?
I don't think he's going to surprise you. Tony worked for me for years. Tony's worked for me since 2005, I think it was. So at the end of my career, everywhere I went, I brought Tony Reyes with me because he holds the line. He's a disciplinarian. He will hold you accountable.
So there was a lieutenant who was the top cop on the East Shore who had an arsenal, threatened to commit mass murder, held his wife for 5 days and kids in the house. Did he do a good job, like holding that guy to account?
Well, that guy's in jail, Paul.
He didn't show up. I don't think he's in jail. Didn't he let out?
Well, he's been arrested on him. I mean, listen,
they're stretching this out, so he's going to get a big pension. He
Well,
for
no,
5 days.
I mean,
he didn't
those
show up
are
for work.
very,
He
very.
didn't show up for work for a week.
Listen, those are. I mean, I don't know if they're stretching it out. I mean, if they're stretching it out to make sure he gets a pension, that's terrible. We should get some proof on that. But let's not forget the other thing here, though, too. You can't pick your friends. I mean, you get to pick your friends. I get it, but some guys, that's your friend. There's no way that he knew that this kid was going to do this. None of us did. Ray was my friend too. To be quite honest, he worked for me. I thought he was a great guy.
What about on the that anti-Trump protester where there was pictures of this unarmed protester got thrown to the ground, got a concussion, slammed around. The state police were doing a riot.
I remember.
New Haven police always did stuff. They didn't even investigate those guys.
Listen, I'm going to tell you from being in the position. Being the assistant chief is maybe you have the least authority in the police department. I could assure you that. You have no union coverage. So anything you do as far as writing or trying to discipline an officer is immediately usurped, and the chief is responsible. You can't make a move as the assistant chief without the chief okaying it. Okay. And if the chief is going to okay it, they're going to do it. Trust me.
All right. Well, then we have good days coming up. What did you think about the incident in Hamden?
So the body camera video?
So I feel like Hamden is become, especially Southern Hamden, is a lot like New Haven now in its makeup and its issues, but they're about 10, 15 years behind us at learning how to deal with them. So he had an officer who some guy was driving erratically, didn't stop, pulled into his own driveway. The cops then come out and order him out. There's another guy in the car. And the other guy says he can't speak English, say, we don't believe you. We're calling ICE on you.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then they say, if you don't come out now, I'm going to kill you. Shoot you dead.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
I think they should work on their deportment a little bit. I think threatening with ICE and threatening. I mean, that's off the
What do you
deep
think?
end.
What do you think, Harry?
I'm okay with the ICE thing. No.
Really?
No, you shouldn't. Like he said, some people just.
Now this officer,
I don't even know what they're thinking.
So it turns out this officer,
because they had their cam on, right?
Yeah.
So why would you do that? Yeah. I don't get it.
I don't think
at least shut off the camera.
I'll tell you why he might have left the camera on. Thought it was okay because he was investigated by their own department with a similar accusation of having lost his cool a year or two earlier.
Right.
And it was in New Haven, I think, if you're right about New Haven, they would never gotten away with it. But he said he didn't break the rules. He did get disciplined in one other case involving a protective order when he knew the family and didn't take certain action. But I think this guy, the awareness, because for a year nothing happened, but then when it got shown on Channel 8, they did the investigation. I think that maybe they have a situation where that didn't happen in a vacuum, but that it's considered okay police work.
Well,
they're saying it's not okay police work now. They got public, but if the guy had similar incidents before and got away with it.
So first, what I'll say is this: I'm a proponent of civilian review, but I'm also a proponent of an agency, like an individual third-party contractor that conducts I think that should exist. That conducts all internals for police departments. You're a private company. You're contracted when these things come up. So we're to the point now where nobody
your contract
believes.
Be dependent on being easy on the cops so they won't rehire you?
No, I think that what we should do is, well, no, I think
unless the police commission
it should be objective, right? And I think that sometimes that's what is needed because a lot of cops certainly don't want. It's uncomfortable. I was in internal affairs. It's uncomfortable investigating another police officer.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there should be a third party that does that.
I have to say though, and I think you're right. Although my one experience with internal affairs, I was very upset about. I don't want to go into details on the people. I was very upset about an arrest of someone in our organization.
Yeah.
And the person conducting the internal review was a personal friend of the officer under.
Right.
And that person did a great review. I completely trusted that it was going to be a fair and factual review, and it was. I had a problem with the assistant chiefs who changed the outcome based on the review, which I thought was outrageous. But I felt that I think you're right structurally, but it's also about people. This one person at the review was so honest and straight that I didn't have a problem with it.
Right. So here, when we talk about, you just said, Tony Reyes, he had his opportunity to this, to opportunity to that. Here's what I'll tell you. We'll go back to Anthony Campbell. I know both of these guys for a long time. Anthony Campbell, great guy. Like
they're
I said,
both good people.
Good people.
And have a lot of strengths.
But, you know what, and Jim Lewis used to say this to me all the time.
He was the chief a couple of years ago.
Yeah. He was, during the 2008, 9, 10, or whatever it was. And he used to tell me the hardest thing about the job is the disciplining. of fellow officers.
He was good at it. And
right?
He had the trust of police. He
And
was
so
considered pro-police.
Right.
And
And so
swift.
I asked him, how do you do that? And he used to say to me, John, there's a fine line between holding your cops accountable and hanging them out to dry. He said there's a very thin line. He said if you have the validity and the respect of your officers, you'll know where that line is. And if you hold them accountable, they'll always stand behind you. But if you hang them out to dry, they will not. What I understand about Anthony Campbell is this: great guy, smart guy, super smart guy. Kind of didn't develop the ability to know where that line is, only because leading up to his time as a chief, he didn't spend a whole lot of time supervising officers in the field. That's where Tony Reyes is different. He has. And I'm not going to tell you that he's okay with coming in and he's going to suspend everybody in this, but he knows where that line is. And you won't see something that's so glaringly in violation of the rules without action from Tony Reyes. I'm going to tell you that.
Okay.
That's cool. The truth. And
well, I have high hopes for the guy.
I'll come back.
He's going to be a good
after
chief.
a little while.
He's going to be a good chief. And I respect the guy.
And if he doesn't live up, I'm going to call him and I say, listen, you made a fool of me on Paul's show.
No. I think he's going to be a very good chief. I have a lot of respect for Tony Reyes. Before we leave, you talk about young people ascending in the department, having positions that used to go to more seasoned officers. There's a very enthusiastic, positive guy in the Hill taking over as chief named Justin Marshall Hill. Yeah. Justin Marshall.
Yeah, he worked for me.
He's working really hard with people. And he said some things, we've gone to some of the meetings, everyone loves him there, that I just wondered about. Like once he said, there was there's a lot of crime in the neighborhood. What we need from you neighbors is not to go out after dark. Any thoughts on that, Harry? Is that a crime prevention strategy?
I don't know. Those were the rules where I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, New York.
It'll certainly decrease the crime at night. Yeah. That's for sure.
But it didn't decrease it over there. But you knew to stay home if you were one of the good guys.
Is that what it's like in the Hill, or should we say we want people on the streets and we want to work together to solve crime? We don't want you being scared and staying.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I think that pushes the formless fear.
And this guy was obviously a very good district manager.
Right,
people love him.
Listen, these guys.
It's youth, isn't it?
Right. It takes a little time to get this job on.
And here's a case where I think he did do the right thing. I just wonder what you thought about this. He was praising a citizen who there was a break-in, burglar.
Yeah.
And the citizen held the burglar at gunpoint until the cops came. And the guy was really shook up after. He didn't want to write about it. It was cool. And he was praised a lot by the cops. Is that? And I actually, this is an honest question.
Yeah.
Is that what we want people to do?
That's really not what you want them to do. They're going to do it if they.
You would hope. Here's the problem, Paul. Right? What's the average response time of
It really varies. Sometimes it's really
depends
fast.
On what like a hot call, I'm sure New Haven's got to be under a minute, under 2 minutes.
So how long does it take for you to die? Right. So if you're a licensed gun owner and somebody enters your home, I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong. Because some people would say sometimes that can make it more dangerous.
It makes it more dangerous for
you might
get
killed, and also for the guy holding the gun.
Right,
like the homeowner might get killed.
Yeah. Well, usually, to be honest with you, in those kind of calls, you're going to get that information on the way there that the homeowner's got the person at gunpoint. So when I get there, I know that the guy with the gun is the good guy. But
so you're saying it's tough for the cop to know when he comes,
right?
And also, if the burglar,
absolutely, I think the cop just got shot, actually by a homeowner.
Right. So if I get there and they say a guy with a gun, I'm.
And the other is, how about at the first part before the cop gets there? If the burglar wasn't otherwise going to shoot you, if you pull a gun, might he shoot you?
Or he may take it from you. Over 80% of those cases where somebody's using a gun to defend themselves, it gets taken from them.
So again, no criticism of anyone involved.
If the burglars, if you're saying if the burglar wasn't going to shoot you and then
you pull a gun,
so now he's defending himself?
No, not defending himself, but he's more likely to act violently.
Well,
John just said there are all these cases where they
why are they taking a gun into your house, right? So, I mean, I guess it depends how you look at it.
Obviously, we're not going to be down on the guy or the cops. Everybody did well here. We're glad they're alive. Mike's question was, what's the best advice to give people?
Well,
Harry thinks pull your gun. What do you think, John?
You could do nothing.
Listen, I would never discourage anybody who's armed in their house to use, to take their gun out on an intruder. There's no doubt about that. What I would say is if you do that and you call the police, just be as articulate as you can about what's going on there. So the officers have all that information when they get there.
And the guy did a good job.
Yeah.
And we respected his privacy. And I respected talking to you guys today. It was great to have John Velleca, WNHH's resident criminal justice and policing expert. Matter of fact, I would say the state's resident criminal justice policing expert.
Thank you very much.
And Harry
the
Jost,
country's.
the bravest man in New Haven and the multi-talented WNHH studio manager. Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.